Hello, this is Mark Miller. And once again, we have the Kitsap Literary Artists and Writers annual Halloween show. No, we're not at the BCAT Studios. We're once again at the Blue Forge Films Blue Legacy Studios. I'll be interviewing a couple authors, local authors here in a little while, so that we can sit there and they'll have doing some horrific readings from some of their extremely horrifying and scary books. But that's what Halloween is all about, isn't it? Scary and horrifying. So, anyways, we'll kind of, if I can get this out. Anyways, we're going to go ahead and start here in just a minute. As soon as I get this, just quit it. Anyways, you know, some animals just don't want to listen. I got to get a trainer here. Anyways, we're going to be starting this show, and hopefully you'll enjoy it again like you've done in past years. So once again, this is Mark Miller, and this is going to be the Kitsap Literary Artists and Writers annual Halloween show. Hello, once again, Mark Miller here with our annual Kitsap Literary Artists and Writers Halloween show. I have two local horrific authors here with their works of scary written word, and they're going to be reading from them, and then before that we're going to be doing a short little interview. We have Mark Allen here over on my left, and on my right we have Lauren Patzer. Mark Allen is the author of Just Before Dawn, and Lauren Patzer is the author of From the Shadows. So I'd like to welcome you two here.
Thank you.
And always shake hands. So let's kind of start out with, I'll start out here with Mark, he's on my left. What got you into writing horror?
I have loved horror literature and horror films since I was a small child, growing up in a small town in Texas in the 1960s. I grew up watching all the old black and white Universal horror movies, you know, the Wolfman, Frankenstein, Dracula, Creature from the Black Lagoon. It's just been something that I have gravitated to all my life.
And how about you, Lauren? What got you into the horror genre?
Well, I'll tell you, there's a lot of things growing up as a kid that I watched on TV and some books I read as well. But I would say the thing that really hooked me was reading the Amityville Horror from beginning to end because I could not put it down. That was a long 14 hours. And that just struck me as, okay, you can really grab somebody's attention. You can really keep them hooked in a story with horror very easily.
Okay, and who was the author of that?
I have not the first clue.
It was literally just...
It was Amityville Horror, the original novel for the book that they made the movie from.
Oh, okay. I'm sitting here drawing a blank. I should know that, but I don't.
Sorry.
Brains goes. Now, Mark here, also, you were actually in the horror film world for a bit also.
I was, yes.
So
Yeah. Kind of still in it, but novels are my main concentration these days.
Okay, and so kind of tell the audience a little bit about your experience in producing and filming some horror movies.
In 2005, I wrote, produced, directed, and edited a teen slasher film set in the desert called Delirium. And it was, kind of a formulaic film. It was set up with each character represented a different stereotype of young people. You have the college jock, you've got his girlfriend, kind of the princess, the diva. You have a rather masculine gay woman in it. You've got the studious black character who's very serious about his education, and then you have who turns out to be the final girl is a woman who is going to school. She's a military veteran. And she's going to school on her GI Bill.
Okay.
And their car breaks down out in the desert on a road that they were told not to take. Of course. And the car breaks down, and they're miles from nowhere. But when they look at a map, because they're so far out, their phones and GPS won't work.
Right.
But one of the guys had an old-fashioned map, and they paper map, and they spread it out on the hood of the car, and they figure out there's a town due north of them 12 miles, but they have to walk across the desert to do it. And they decide that they're going to do this at night when it's cool, right?
Yep.
And as they march out across the desert, they start to get picked off one by one in some rather gruesome fashions by some unknown killer that's out there following them.
Oh, okay.
And that was delirium. I wrote and co-produced a movie called Early Grave, which is still showing on Amazon Prime and on Tubi, and is still available on DVD and that kind of thing. That was another classic setup. I was writing my version of Agatha Christie's 10 Little Indians.
Oh, okay.
You know, one location, everyone, all these people are brought together to be held accountable for a horrific sin that they perpetrated on someone years ago, back when they were in high school. And it all comes back to haunt them, and they get picked off one by one in gruesome ways by an unknown killer. You know, so there's a theme there to the way I was writing screenplays back then in the early 2000s.
And Lauren, I think you've done a little bit of horror acting with Blue Forge Films.
Yep.
So
a little writing too.
No, of course, a little writing. So a little bit. Tell us about your experiences in the film world.
So I think probably one of the more recent things was probably Overdrawn, which is a little horror short I wrote and starred in, and Rogue Raven Films, I think, helped produce that.
Yeah.
And that was part of one of the short horror trilogies that Blue Forge Films produces. That was just a lot of fun, just the whole thing. But then I also wrote there was another horror anthology that Blue Forge did, and it was 6 different sets of actors, and you wrote a little horror short for each one of them, and then somebody else wrote another set for them as well, and that was a lot of fun. Just coming up with different horrific things for them to do, and making it different each one, because you want to be, change it up a little bit and be entertaining over that period of time.
I'll ask both of you. I'll start with Mark over here too. And I know there's people out there that are going to say, "Why do you ask that question for?" There is a difference in writing scripts than there is writing books.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So
they are nothing alike at all, and I feel very strongly on this. Speaking for myself, when I write a novel, I am painting pictures with words. I am trying to be so vivid in my description that a movie plays in the writer's head. That's what I'm going for. And a book, if done properly, can become a work of art. There is an art and a craft to the book. Screenplays, at least in my experience, my opinion, is that a screenplay is a technical exercise. It's cold and it's clinical. Never use 10 words if 2 words will do. Never have dialogue and exposition if you can have action that shows it to push the story forward. I liken a finished screenplay to a blueprint for a house.
Okay.
You know, and all it is you give a blueprint to a house, to a construction company, and then they go build the house. They're the ones that do that. With a screenplay is nothing more than a blueprint to make a movie. There's a thought in the screenwriting world that I disagree with, which is that the screenplay is a work of art in and of itself. I disagree with that. But if you write a good screenplay, I mean a really solid one, if the movie is made properly, the movie may become a work of art. But the screenplay itself, I have to disagree with that.
Yeah. But as an author writing a book, we are storytellers.
Yes.
And
we're world builders.
Right. And that's something I think that people that say, that it's the old trope about show it, don't tell it, and they've been beating people over the head, authors, with that recently, and I always tell everybody, that doesn't do any good if you're not telling a good story.
Yes.
And so, how about your experience with the genre?
So my experience, it's very similar with his concept in that it's a framework. A script is a framework for a story that's translated to film, and a book is more of the finished house, as it were. I feel with a book you can get a little bit more into inside the characters, more of how they feel, what they're experiencing at that point in time. With the screenplay, it's a visual medium.
Yeah.
And so you're describing what people see, and that's what you're limited to, what people see, what they say. So just what you can hear and what you can see. And with a novel, you can get into all sorts of how they feel, what they smell, all that matter. And along those lines, I wrote a screenplay called Undead Reckoning for a full-length feature film.
Yeah.
And I took that screenplay and I said, okay, I'm going to make that a book.
Right.
And when you translate a screenplay, that story, into a novel, you don't just copy-paste the screenplay and then go. Now you're getting into the characters, their thoughts, their feelings. You're building all of these things about the story and the characters and the events that you don't have in that bare bones screenplay.
Yeah. And would you both say that, unfortunately, I would call it Hollywood, they have a tendency right now of, if we can blow it up and get everybody's attention, let's blow it up, and to heck with, like you said, the nuances of the character.
Explode it or sequel it. That's
yeah.
That's mostly Hollywood these days. Yeah.
That's the studio system for sure. To a degree, that's the streamers too, the big streamers.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you what, and they're starting to get the memo that the stuff that they've been putting out the last several years has run its course. The superhero genre is actually in decline right now.
Thank God.
Movies that that they thought were going to be surefire hits with big stars are tanking. They're not making their money back. And this is when, the studios have put $200, $250, $300 million just in the production budget.
Yeah.
And that doesn't include the prints and all the advertising and the marketing. The P&A costs can can make their total investment double.
Yeah.
And you know, the last Indiana Jones movie tanked. The last Mission Impossible movie, it turned a profit. It's making money, but it has not made the money that they had projected for it.
Hopeful.
Okay.
It wasn't a blockbuster.
No.
Yeah.
People's viewing habits have changed,
Yeah.
and theaters are actually starting to die a slow death. I was talking with someone just the other. In fact, I was talking with my agent down in Los Angeles just the other day about this, and she said, "Yeah, nobody knows what to do anymore.
Yeah.
You know, because things are changing so rapidly."
When you're writing a book, you can't throw a bunch of CGI in it.
Mm-mm.
Like you said, you've got to be able to sit there and develop the plot, the characters, the environment, like you were saying about smell, taste, feel. In other words, you can throw all these other little details in there that's very hard to show in a film unless you were, what's his face, Waters, that did smell-o-vision.
Yes.
Yes. Was it John Waters?
John Waters. There
John
we go.
Waters.
So,
Yeah.
and of course, he did that as a joke, you know.
Yeah.
And so when you're writing a book, I think that's the difference, and I think that's part of the problem that I see. Hollywood, to a certain extent, I think has forgotten that hey, you've got to drag the audience and get them inserted into the story, which you do with a good book. The reader's getting inserted into the story.
Yeah. When I think about the compare and contrast of writing a screenplay as to writing a novel, the screenplay is cold and clinical. The formatting for a screenplay is so rigid, and you only have so many pages.
Right.
You know, your script has to be between, say, 85 and around 110, 115 pages.
Yeah.
Anything more than that, and you've got something that's not going to sell. But it's cold and it's clinical. Whereas writing a book, to me, is warm and fuzzy. It's all about the emotion and all that. Writing a screenplay, I can write a screenplay and get finished and go, okay, got that done. Next. But when I write a book, you've heard of method acting?
Yeah.
I am a method writer. I have to feel what my characters are going through so that I can write it, you know. And my characters, if I'm really in the groove, my characters will tell me the story.
Yeah.
All I have to do is, you know, work fast enough that I can keep up with what they're telling me. But I have to put myself in their shoes. I have to put myself into that situation. You know, if it's cold and foggy at night, what's it going to feel like if I reach out for a metal handrail?
Right.
You know, and that kind of thing. And that's the beauty of writing a novel. You're the writer, you're the producer, you're the director, you're the lighting designer, you're the cinematographer, you're the special effects guy, you're everything.
So, Lauren?
That does make it a little more challenging.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Do you get shivers, or do you ever get teary-eyed when you're writing your horror books?
Probably not my horror books. My horror books are typically a little more along the lines of vengeance.
Oh.
So you're more cheering on what's happening to the bad guy.
Okay.
But I have written a few stories. There's a few stories I know that, like in Dissonance Junction, where they're not horror. Well, they're horror, but they're a little bit different kind of horror.
Right.
There's a few that bring a tear to my eye, even upon rereading them years later.
Well, to a certain extent, wouldn't you kind of say that we can, with horror, we have the old traditional idea of what horror was.
Yeah.
But I think over the years, people have kind of pushed it along a little bit more and kind of tried to expand the universe of what horror was. And then, of course, we had the spots, like you were saying. There was a time in not that long ago when everything was like slasher movies. And they're trying to bring some of them back, but I don't think they're succeeding that much anymore.
You know why? Because they're lazy filmmakers.
Okay.
They're thinking that the blood and gore and the TNA is enough to make a profitable film. And the problem is, horror fans are really, really smart. Underestimate your audience at your own peril.
Right.
And if it's just blood and guts, if there's no story, if there's no motivation, if there's no character development, people are left flat because they don't care. They have no vested interest in who lives and who dies. And that's the problem.
Which is why I've understood years ago there were some people that called some of the movies slasher porn, because all it was they just wanted to see how many knife slashes you could get into a scene or something like that.
And even in my screenplays, when I wrote Delirium, it's a slasher movie, right? But it's not really about being a slasher film.
Right.
There's more going on underneath that comes out, and it comes out at the very, very end. You find out what was really going on the whole time in the film.
Well, we're going to give you two local authors here a chance to read from your works here in just a minute, and kind of, I guess, give us a chance to re-examine the horror genre in the written word.
Hello, my name is Mark Allen, and today I will be reading from my latest novel, Just Before Dawn, a nocturnal novel. Friday night in San Diego. Again. Everyone wants to party, have fun, eat, drink, laugh. Boomerang, like so many coiled springs. Put the frustrations of the work week behind them, even if it's only for a few hours. The goth community was no different. They wanted to party too. And Splinter was the busiest goth fetish club in town. The $30 cover charge didn't faze the club's clientele. $30 a pop not only kept the lights on, it functioned as customer quality control. It kept the riffraff out. The painted steel door was guarded by a scowling blonde bouncer roughly the size of a silverback gorilla. He looked mean enough to eat rusty nails. 6 feet tall, a pro football linebacker's physique. Big for his age since he was 10, he had been nicknamed Kong after that ape in that movie. It bothered him then, but the name stuck. He learned to take it, get used to it, accept it. He never learned to like it. Tonight he surveyed the line, running a mental checklist. Were the people dressed appropriately for the club? Had they been there before? And if so, had they caused any trouble? The reason for that is banishments here were forever. 1 strike and you're out. The club owner said so. No second chances. Kong wasn't emotionally invested in any of that. He simply enforced policy. If you met the age requirements and the dress code, didn't cause trouble, and passed personal muster with Kong, you were going to get inside. Charlie Simpkins approached Kong on the street. Charlie didn't look like a serial killer. He looked nowhere near the stereotypical large, hulking, soul-tortured outcast, that misanthropic loser type seen in TVs and movies. In fact, Charlie was rather attractive, a smooth-faced and handsome young man. But Charlie's dark, slimy soul slithered deep inside him, a roiling snake twisting and turning, feasting upon itself. Charlie epitomized all that is evil in the world. Under 30 and with a slight build, his appearance belied lean muscle rippling beneath oversized clothes that allowed for more freedom of movement and created a less than accurate memory of him in other people's minds, if they remembered him at all. Kong had an excellent memory. This pipsqueak had been coming since opening weekend. Something creepy about this kid, something the big bouncer couldn't quite determine. Whatever it was, it made him uneasy. And no one made Kong feel uneasy. Well, almost no one. $30. Charlie hands Kong the cash and moved past him and descended to the staircase inside. As the twit disappeared from view, Kong exhaled, whooshing air out of his body. That short stack frightened Kong, and that disturbed him even more. He had been a bouncer or a bodyguard most of his adult life. He could read people and could read within seconds who posed a threat and who was harmless. Kong had seen the real deal. He had gone up against the real deal, hand to hand, up close and personal. And Charlie was trouble with a capital T. If he and Kong ever got into it, that little bastard would not back down. Not a minute, not an inch. He would not hesitate. Unlike most people, Charlie was not afraid of Kong. Ramslyn Domingo sat alone at a bistro table in a dark corner downstairs. She was known as Ramsey to her friends and family, and she sipped vodka that tasted like it had been made by Monsanto instead of Grey Goose. She watched as everyone around her pursued their versions of fun. Some of it really creeped her out. She turned away because some people here were into horrifying kinks. Blood and bondage was not her thing. Her research into the vampire goth subculture had shown just how dangerous some of these acts could truly be. On the stairway, Charlie scanned the environment. A creature of habit, he always took notice of any change, no matter how small. New chairs, different tables, a change in decor. Nothing escaped his attention. Predatory eyes that hid behind amber contacts looked over the men, women, guests, employees. Anyone was fair game to Charlie. Everyone was fair game to Charlie. His eyes settled on a beautiful Hispanic woman sitting in a dark corner. A woman alone. How interesting. Ramsey tossed her head back and slammed the last of her drink down her throat. Suddenly a man stood across the table from her. He had not been there just a moment before. His expression appeared to be one of curiosity. "I saw you from the bar," he said. "I wanted to come talk to you." "And why is that?" "You don't belong here," he stated. All this gestured widely with his hands. "This isn't your scene." "Is it that obvious?" He smiled from a mile away. His eyes, though, hypnotic, like looking into a pool and never seeing the bottom. Maybe it was those contact lenses. He looked like a snake that had grown limbs. That was it. He looked reptilian. "So, some dweeb stood you up," Charlie said. "Was he your boyfriend?" "I was going to do an interview for a book I'm writing." "A writer, huh? What do you write?" "Nonfiction. I've had a few articles and short stories published in magazines." "How exciting." "So what's this book about?" Ramsey threw her arms wide. "All of this. The vampire goth community. What draws people to it, what they get out of it, why some stay and others leave." "Sounds cerebral," he said. "Well, I hope so." "So, what is it that you want to know?" "Well, everything. The allure, the benefits, the pitfalls, the dangers." This got his attention. "Dangerous people?" Well, this scene might attract a certain type. And he thought that over for a moment. Then he said, well, you've actually come to the right place. You'd be willing to tell me about the scene? He smiled, and it was slimy. How about if I show you? She looked at him wary. Show me what? Everything you need to know, he said. And then some. The two made their way towards the staircase across the room. She had to stop and start, bob and weave to avoid bumping into people. Charlie moved fluidly through the crowd, like the serpent his contact lenses suggested. He got to the bottom of the stairs first. She arrived seconds later. The two were swallowed up as they went up the stairs and the door closed behind them. The next time anyone would ever see Ramsey Domingo again, she would be dressed only in blood. This reading was from my latest novel, Just Before Dawn, a nocturnal novel. This is a sequel to my debut novel, Nocturnal. It is available exclusively through Amazon.com.
Hi, today I am reading from the Shadows, a short story book of horror short stories. This story is Collapse. The body slid to a dull, wet thud on the floor. While the connection with the concrete may have fractured the skull in some way, the injury didn't matter in the end. The blonde woman's eyes fluttered as she gasped her last breath, her face a contorted mass of bubbling purple splotches. Finally, she stopped shuddering as her last breath left her body, and she fixed him with her dying gaze, her blue irises surrounded by the hemorrhaging blood vessels in the whites of her eyes. One of the eyeballs popped open, spewing the gooey, bloodied, aqueous humor from her ruptured eye socket. Her lone observer turned and retched on the lab floor. He grabbed the counter of the silver and white cabinet for support as he let go all over the tile beneath his feet. "Are you all right, Will?" a woman's voice said over the speakers hidden in the ceiling. "Yeah," Will Trainer said as he grabbed a towel from the dispenser and wiped his mouth. "Can you just..." He waved his hand in the dead woman's direction behind a thick pane of glass. "Initiating decontamination protocol 7, the woman replied, and the room with the corpse lit up with a blue and white flame. Steel safety doors lowered and blocked the scene from Will's view as he took a few steps to the right out of the puddle of lunch. Will ran some water in the sink and splashed the cold water on his face. He grabbed another towel, wet it, and cleaned off his shoes. "Will, I'm sorry for your loss." The woman's voice came over the speakers, low and quiet. "Don't worry about it, Katerina. We've all lost someone," Will said and took a deep breath. "I knew this was coming when we brought her here 2 days ago. None of the interventions worked as I'd anticipated and feared." Will picked up a coffee cup from the counter by the sink and threw it with all his might at the steel safety door and screamed. He picked up a metal chair and threw it as well. It clanged off the safety door and landed somewhere near his vomit. He put his hands on his knees and took several deep breaths. He closed his eyes and slowed his breathing until it was controlled and calm returned. He stood up slowly and walked to the door behind him. "Let's get back at it, Katerina," Will said as he pushed the door open and walked to the stairwell. Tears streamed down his face. He let them flow as he worked on his breathing. He took the steps 2 at a time and ascended the 2 floors to the ground floor. Katerina, a red-headed woman roughly in her 30s. Will had never asked. waited there for him in a lab coat with a full face of sympathy. She'd lost her husband and daughter just a week ago. Her green eyes twinkled with tears. "We'll try batch 57, Will said, his voice cracking. But Katerina just ran to him and hugged him, crying tears she'd been holding back for a week. He'd never seen her cry. She'd just had a stiff upper lip for the last week, unable to see her family in quarantine before they died. She couldn't hold it back any longer. Her compassion built the dam Will had been building to hold his own emotions in check until they could be processed later. He joined her tears and hugged her with all his might. They shared a horrible life experience like so many had already. An older man's voice crackled to life over the speakers. "Outpost 40, are you there?" Katerina stood up, huffed a breath out, and sniffled. She wiped her tears away and faced the ceiling. "This is Outpost 40, Katerina replied. "Is that you, General?" "You're it," the voice huffed. The strain was evident. "I'm the last one at 23. The man's voice cracked, and he devolved into a fit of coughing. "What?" Will asked. "Everyone's gone," the man said. "I just watched Dr. Tripp explode in the control room, bathing everything in bloody mucus. I'm not far behind, perhaps an hour or two. God, the pain is unbearable." In his mind's eye, Will could see the good general fighting the virus with all his might and losing miserably. "I didn't know," Will said. "I've uploaded the last of the data to the control system. But Will," the general said, "there's hardly anyone left. I can't reach Washington state or local officials. Nobody." "Katerina and I don't even have a fever," Will replied. "You've both got some kind of immunity," the general said. "There's no way with the runaway infection rate you weren't exposed like the rest of us. Check your own antibodies. For the ones you might be able to save. Maybe a vaccine, maybe a cure. Not sure what humanity has left." The general coughed violently and the line went dead. "We've been working on Marla all night," Katerina said. "I've never checked the feeds. Let's get up to control, see if there's anything left." They walked down the hallway to another stairwell and walked quietly up the stairs. Between his wife's excruciating death a moment ago and the news from the general just now, Will was pretty sure he was in shock. It was the only way to explain how he wasn't breaking down right now. Minutes later, they entered the control room. Huge screens hung on the walls, 10 feet high and 15 across. The room seemed cavernous with just the two of them. They walked to the control systems in the center and adjusted the feeds on each of the screens. A few of the feeds just showed static, indicating they'd gone completely offline. They cycled through until they found several static camera shots. The unmanned camera angles revealed a city of death, silence, and little movement. Outside of a stray bird, or in the case of Chicago, a brisk wind that shuffled debris around, nothing moved. The computer to the left of Katerina beeped, and they both jumped. Katerina unlocked the screen and manipulated the system until she'd opened a message. She read the screen and her face went white. "Will, it's from Dr. Samuels," she said, and nearly collapsed in the chair behind her. Will's face contorted in rage. "Everything's gone and now he shows up?" "He's sending a helicopter for us," Katerina said. "So we can crash when the pilot dies?" Will picked up a clipboard and flung it across the room. Katerina rolled back to the computer and continued reading. "It's a drone," Katerina said. She squinted her eyes shut. "Where the hell has he been for the last 2 months?" "We'll ask him when we see him," Will said. "If I die while killing him, it will be worth it." A whirring hum sounded above their heads, and Will looked at Katerina. "You'll have competition," Katerina said with a scowl. She got up and walked to the exit. Will followed close behind. And that's not all of the story, but you can read the rest of it in From the Shadows, available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and at laurenpatzer.com.
I had no idea that someone could make this kind of money in one night just for taking someone's daughter out.
Only someone like you could earn it. If my own daughter won't listen to her own father about the dangers that can happen with partying and drinking and a revolving door of boyfriends, then it would take someone like you for her to realize the reality of it.
Then I guess it was worth getting my eye scratched out by her in self-defense.
And I made sure to include extra because of that.
Thanks. And what do you think she would do if she knew that you paid me for it?
She'd probably want to kill me. And that would probably happen tonight if she woke up. So you better go home now.
Can I use the bathroom first?
That's fine. It's upstairs. But be very quiet. I mean it.
Yes, sir.
Did it work? Did you get it?
You bet. It all worked. We are officially out of here.
thank you to you gentlemen for doing some excellent horrific readings here. And how about you, Mark? What other of your basic works do you have out there, body of work?
In addition to Just Before Dawn, this is a sequel to my debut novel, Nocturnal. A lot of the characters from that first book are back in this too. And I've also written a book that actually just won an International Book Award. I wrote a werewolf novel that's actually set here in the Pacific Northwest called Blood Red Moon. And that is the first book in a trilogy of stories concerning werewolves here in the Pacific Northwest.
Now, when you become even more famous with more awards, are you going to remember us little people?
Of course. I can't believe anybody anywhere has any interest at all in anything I have to say. I'm still blown away by it.
Underestimated the interest of the horror community.
I guess I have.
But how about you there, Lauren?
I do have a couple of my books here. I've got The Haunting of Orchard House. This one is immortal. It's a little novella. This is my latest published novel, Granny Bale. My next one is...
aren't you doing a book signing at Barnes & Noble?
I'll be doing a book signing at Barnes & Noble, in the Silverdale Barnes & Noble.
On what? Yeah, that's coming up.
That is coming up. I want to say it's next Sunday.
It's after Halloween? Or
Is it Sunday or Saturday?
Before Halloween. Oh, well.
I think it's Saturday, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, it's before Halloween.
Oh, okay.
The Dark Collective is a series of horror short stories. What else have I got? Dissonance Junction. That's a mix of horror stories and some science fiction dystopian stories and some other stuff in there. And then, of course, we just did From the Shadows. And all of those are available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble.
Okay, well, once again, gentlemen, I'm glad that you could both make it today and be part of this broadcast. And appreciate your time and efforts, and also hopefully everybody out there will pick up your works of art here and be sufficiently horrified. Thank you very much once again.
All right. Thank you, Marshall.
And that's a wrap for this year's Kitsap Literary Artists and Writers Halloween show. Once again, we have to thank Blue Forge Films, and the pets are getting rambunctious again. God, I need a pet. I need a pet guy. Anyways, so hopefully you'll watch the show and you'll enjoy it. And if it wasn't for the fact of Blue Forge Film Division and Bremerton Kitsap Access Television, we wouldn't be able to put this Kitsap Literary Artists and Writers Showcase on every month. So if you really like to watch stuff like this and watch me make a complete fool out of myself, you can watch us on Comcast Channel 12 or Wave Cable Astound Channel 3 at 6 p.m. on Saturday evenings. Or you can look us up on YouTube under the KLAW YouTube page that's supported and developed by Blue Forge Legacy Films. So with that, have a nice day, have a great horrific Halloween, and we'll see you next year. Oh, but then you can watch the other interviews I have that are a little bit more normal, I guess you call it. Have a very nice day and a very productive year. Good evening.